In this lesson, we are going to quickly learn about traversing arrays and removing items from arrays to shrink the size of our array, the opposite of that .add method that we learned in the last lesson. Let's take a look first at traversing arrays. So traversing arrays, of course, traversing just means moving through arrays, and we can do it in the same ways that ArrayLists, we can do it the same way that we did with arrays. We can use both our regular for loop and the for each loop. Let's take a look at both of these. So the regular for loop is going to look like this. So our for method, or our for keyword, and then we're going to go ahead and say int, I'm going to use x again because it's a little easier to see. Int x equals 0. You could use I or whatever. And we're going to say x is less than our books dot size. Not size, size. This is a new method. Instead of dot length, it's going to be dot size. Let me rewrite it one more time so it's clear here. Books, and it's with a plural s, books dot size. So there we go. This is new. This is different than length. And we're still going to be protecting against an index out of bounds. Protect against, I can spell right, against index out of bounds. So we can still get an index out of bounds error if we don't use our less than books.size. And again, we're going to say x plus plus as we normally do. And we could do a simple println to print out the books in our book list. So we could say system.out.println books.get, right? Instead of using the square brackets, get x. And this would simply print out each book in our list, and it would print it a little bit differently than the standard toString because it wouldn't print with the square brackets. We would get rid of those. Okay, let's look at our for each loop. So our for each loop would be similar to the way that we do with arrays. So we would say for string, and I would say book inside of books, and simply a system.out.println, and we would print out our book. And these two loops, we can put these two loops have the same functionality. So these are basically interchangeable in their behavior and what you're able to do with them. All right, so that's fairly simple. Traversing arrays, for the most part, the for each loop in ArrayLists is preferred, but every once in a while you're going to need to know where something is in an ArrayList, and that's when our regular for loop comes in handy. So this is used when we need to know location. When we need to know the location. That's really when we want to use a standard for loop. For almost everything else, we're going to use a for each loop when it comes to ArrayLists. Let's talk about the remove method. So the remove method, actually, let me add this as a separate note. So the remove method does three things. And this is an important thing to know. So remove method number one. It takes an item from the array at a position, and it returns the value at a given index, at the index. So it returns the value. You get the value back just as you would with the get method, right? So this is same as get. Then the next thing that it does is it deletes the value at the index. This isn't actually the order that it does it in, but it's good enough for what we're working with here, at the index. And then the third thing that it does is that it shifts all values with a greater index down by 1, or subtract 1. Down by 1. So this has two consequences. Number one, it shrinks the size of the array. Or the array list, I'm sorry. Shrinks the size of the array list by 1. And it closes the hole. So it closes the hole, and we get a shift in the values. So there's really three things that happen in there. So you actually have several different things happening within this one method of the remove that we have to keep track of when we are dealing with this method. Okay, so that is the remove method that we need to keep track of. The add method does this a little bit similarly. So the remove method, we're going to give it some index I here, right? So we pass in that index I. With our add method, we had before just a simple add that adds on to the end, but we can also say add an index and give it a value as well. So when we add at an index and a value, it does the same things as remove, but instead it expands our object or our array list. So for number 1 here, it's not going to return anything actually. It's going to add a value in. At the index. And then it's going to shift all values with a greater index plus 1. Right? So it's going to shift everything over, which will expand the size of our array list. And we have to keep track of, as we add something in, everything to the right of that thing we've just added has now shifted by 1, and we've expanded the size of our array list. So let's take a look at this in action really quick. So if I wanted to say books dot remove index of, actually let's go ahead and do this. Let's say this real quick. Let's create a new string variable. And let's say that I wanted to move my index, or I wanted to move one of my things around. So let's scroll back up here to books. And let's say I wanted to move Dune into the first position. So I wanted Dune to swap with 1984. Actually, no, not swap. I just want to move it in there and shift everything down. So how would I do that? There's a couple different ways I can do that, but I'm going to show you how I can do that real quick here with the remove and add. So I'm going to say string.temp, and I'm going to give it the value of my last element in the array. So I'll say books.remove. And here, I'm not going to hard code this number. I am going to use the books.size method to get the last element, of course, subtracting 1 so I don't get an index out of bounds error. And if I trace this, I'll find that temp now has the value of Dune. And my array list, books, now has an array list that only has 2 items in it, 1984 and The Martian. So we've removed Dune from the books, put it into temp, and now we're going to add that back in. So now we say books.add, give it an integer value for the index I want, which is 0, and I'm going to add in temp. So now what it's going to do is it's going to take the value of temp and add it into the 0th position. And it's not going to delete 1984 like it would in an array. Instead, it's going to shift everything over. So my new books is now going to be, so this is after remove, and then we add. So now it's going to be Dune, 1984, and The Martian. And that's how our add and remove behaviors allow us to quickly and easily put things in and take things out and adjust the size of our array lists. All right, I will see you guys in the next one.